mean, you've heard that about serial killers. They study serial killer documentaries and shit before they actually go out and do it.
Yeah. I know, but humanity.
Yeah, we're so weird.
I know we're weird.
We're so weird.
I know.
This idea of eradicating all war. I mean, I remember when I was a little boy, I was living in San Francisco during the height of the Vietnam War, and the Vietnam War ended. And I remember as a boy thinking, oh, this is great. Now there's not going to be any more wars. They figured it out. That war's bad.
Yep. They didn't.
They
didn't, because wars will end. That's the one thing about war. A war will end, but does another one? What's the next war that starts?
They're always sparking up. They're always sparking up somewhere.
I have this weird theory. Well, I don't know. It's a weird theory, but and it's a gross generalization. But I think pretty much every conflict is a result of capitalism. In the sense that raw capitalism, in its nascent form, is it's just a system of trade and so forth. But the way it's been wired, because it doesn't have human well-being involved in the equation, it's just about, can we make this graph go up? We need more of these numbers, and it's just chasing infinite wealth, right? It's
right.
Wealth amassing, but so it has a value system, but human well-being's not in it. So eventually, over time, it's of course people are going to game it, and very few people are going to game it, and they're going to acquire all this stuff, and they're just going to be desensitized to the rest of the inequities and so forth, and then you're going to cause all this animosity, and then there's going to be a lot of people going well, I need to get my stuff back, and then you get all these opportunists that are using the disgruntleism and using that to arm. It's that's my gross oversimplification. I'm sure I'll be corrected millions of times over, but whenever I see any of these conflicts, or even a conflict in my own neighborhood or my neighbors arguing over, it's about a property line, or it's about you didn't do this or you didn't do that. It's this weird thought process that goes into, I don't have enough, or I have all the stuff and I want to keep the stuff, or I want more stuff, and then someone else kind of responding to that in some way. I'm not phrasing it as eloquently as I usually do on ketamine, but that's kind of my. Whenever I see all of these things, I'm just I have a feeling that it's probably maybe that. I don't know.
The problem is the alternative is even more horrific.
What's the alternative?
Socialism.
Socialism. Yeah. I don't know enough about that.
Because the only way that's enforced is by dictators. And then the dictators wind up doing what every human being in power does, which is control all the resources, control all the wealth, live in extravagant houses while everybody starves. Every single communist dictatorship is all run the same way. It's the only way to run them. Because the only way to enforce socialism is through violence. The only way to take people's resources and evenly distribute it, you have to go in with guns.
But what about countries like Sweden and things like that? They have we have socialist
We should
systems.
have social systems.
Yeah, socialist systems. But you're talking about full on socialism. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. That's why. Here's something that's interesting. I really think within our lifetimes, if it hasn't happened already, governments are going to start using AI to do low-level legislation. And now I'm just I'm summarizing in a very optimistic way.
We've been talking about this a lot, actually.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Good. So I got a friend of mine, Dr. Alan D. Thompson. If you don't know about him, check him out. He's an AI expert, researcher. He's an explainer. He has a thing called The Memo that comes out, I think every 2 weeks, something like that. But it gives you a really holistic state of the union of AI. And he's hyper optimistic and calls it human evolution, which I believe in that as well. If it's used well, you get rid of the emotional factor, and you just have something that's looking to solve problems.
Yeah.
And so I think it can at least give you 5 solutions that are non-emotionally based, that are just addressed, that are supposed to kind of maximize the positive probable outcome. And I think we may see a human AI synergistic government, at least low-level government implementation. Probably some country that's can do that and not feel like they're betting the farm on it.
And if it goes well, then other people will implement it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so. We were talking about a AI president,
Yeah.
that you need a president that is immune to bias,
Yes.
corruption, influence, and someone who just looks at things rationally and in an intelligent way that spans all the disciplines, right? Like, how could any president really be an expert in foreign policy, the environment, economics, social justice, infrastructure, immigration? It's not possible. How could one person really know the correct solutions to all those issues? Even if you're briefed. Look, I can't imagine. All I do is run a podcast and do comedy and occasionally commentate on fights. And all those three things take up so much of my fucking time. My whole day today has been having conversations with people about replacement opponents because there's a UFC coming on in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So I've been having all these conversations with experts and people that I know and commentators of who can fit this spot and who's ready and who's in shape and who's turned the fight down. And how could anybody? That's so minor. My role is so small. I have so little to do, and yet it takes up so much of my time. How could anyone manage all of those things? They can't, but AI could.
Yeah.
And
totally.
AI doesn't have a son that gets money from Burisma.
I know. It's like the thing about I know. Well, it's like, I mean, if you look at like, it's really hard. I had a term, I don't know if it exists, but I call it corporocrats. And most people in government essentially are corporocrats in the sense that the things that, when I see people like vetoing things or not getting on board with certain things, and you're like, well, that seems like that would be helpful, but you're choosing not to do that. It's like the influence of corporations on even well-intentioned, people that go into government, they're like, I want to make a difference. I want to make a change. It just gets in there. It's so baked. It's baked in there. And so I don't know how you're gonna overcome that. The only thing I can think of is like, because my thing is like, I'm not really political in the sense that I don't have a party. I'm pretty independent. I'm just like, I want to choose people that are humble enough, that have enough humility to work with anybody that wants to solve a problem that they're wanting to solve, and to create solutions for the most amount of people possible. That's all I'm looking for, because there is no excuse for any of us being, all the inequity we see in all of this stuff is totally solvable if we were much more efficient with how resources are utilized, how they're distributed, and so forth. And what I mean by that is, like, some of my friends are like, well, if you do like universal basic income, which I think is something I'm kind of interested in. I think that is interesting if you can account for where that comes from in a way that doesn't upset people that have a lot of power and a lot of money, feel like